Well, hello everyone, and welcome back, and welcome to Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about ghost stories. Well, I'm not going to talk to you about ghost stories. In fact, that's a lie. G K Chesterton is going to talk to you about ghost stories. I'm not somebody who's read a lot of ghost stories. I've read probably more in the last couple of days than I've read in my life. But I found them to be very interesting. And as this is the season to be scared, which, by the way, is the title of the latest edition of the newsletter that I put out. So feel free to subscribe to that. It is free. And the link, of course, will be down below in the subscription. So with the self-advertisement over, let's have a look and see what G K Chesterton has to say about ghost stories. I can claim to be tolerably detached on the subject of ghost stories. I do not depend upon them in any way, not even in the sordid professional way in which I have at some periods depended upon murder stories. I do not much mind whether they are true or not. I am not, like a spiritualist, a man whose whole philosophy may be said to consist entirely of ghosts. But I am not like a materialist, a man whose whole philosophy is exploded and blasted and blown to pieces by the most feeble and timid intrusion of the most thin and third-rate ghost. I am quite ready to believe that a great number of ghosts were merely turnip ghosts, elaborately prepared to deceive the village idiot. But I am not at all certain that they succeeded even in that, and I suspect that their greatest successes were elsewhere, for it is my experience that the village idiot is very much less credulous than the town lunatic. On the other hand, when the merely sceptical school asks us to believe that every sort of ghost has been a turnip ghost, I think such sceptics rather exaggerate the variety and vivacity and theatrical talent of turnips. There is no particular difficulty about the artistic problem of the ghost story as distinct from the spiritual problem of the ghost. All that is required of this literary form, as of any other, is that it shall observe the laws and limits of its form. Nothing is more fatal, for instance, than mixing up the convention of the ghost story with the convention of the crime story. In the solid and profitable matter of murder, I do not hesitate to say that the artist must be a materialist. I do not say he must accept the dogma that dead men tell no tales, for, after all, the whole art of a detective story is the art of getting tales out of dead men. But I do say that the dead men must be dead, and no mystical, transcendental, spiritual, immortal nonsense about it. Every art has in it something of the quality of a sport. The rules of a sport have nothing to do with reality, but they have a real element of loyalty. Literature is only a game, but it is not even literature unless we keep the rules of the game. Just as the pugilist must not hit below the belt, so the crime novelist must not hit above the body. His business is to present to his reader a nice, fresh, fascinating, suggestive, satisfactory body. He may happen himself to believe in the survival of the soul, an eccentricity which has actually occurred in many cases, including my own, but he has no right to bring in the higher mysteries of immortality to illuminate the lower mysteries of detection. He has no right to do it because it is not playing the game. It is like looking out the answer to a riddle or using a crib in an examination. Even the village idiot can solve the village murder if he receives private information from the ghost of the murdered man. Whether there is any historical truth in such a notion of a ghost, I have not the ghost of a notion. Roughly speaking, I should say that the probabilities are in its favour, for where there is a very great amount of gossip, there is generally some groundwork for the gossip, even if the ground is the graveyard. It is doubtless easy to make very uncharitable use of the proverb that where there is smoke there is fire, but that is because the more puritanical moralists of the village are rather prone to twist it into a totally different proverb, that where there is fire there is hellfire. I do not suggest any such savour of brimstone or any extreme evil or terror as necessarily clinging either to the dead or to the living in this matter, and it is no business of mine to suggest either that the village ghost came from the lower regions or that the village prodigal is going there, but just as such a village character, while perhaps not so black as he is painted, may he of the sort that is seldom successfully whitewashed, so I think it difficult for the sceptic to seal so hermetically all the whited sepulchres of a rationalized model village as to hide all the hints there have been in history of such spectres, sometimes escaping from such sepulchres. There is too large a mass of tradition for there not to be some small nucleus of truth, but beyond that very general impression, which is indeed the common sense of mankind, I have neither will nor power to dogmatize in the matter, but I am quite certain that when such things are used merely as symbols by an artist, the emblematical figures should be of one definite decorative style, or the sepulchres, so to speak of, the same school of monumental architecture. I mean that we must not mix up the ghost story, which is a story about a ghost, with some other technical type of tale, such as a story about a corpse. The ideas are on two different planes, and one will always suffer from the presence of the other. Either the spiritual story will be much too thin, or the blood and bone story will be too thick. Ghosts, in short, may wander about in real life, if they like, because truth is stranger than fiction, but in the refined world of fiction, we must be a little more exclusive and fastidious in our selection of ghosts. They must be family ghosts, in the sense of ghosts of good family, or only living, like the dear old butler, with the best. A mere mob of phantoms, for all I know, may march like an army up the high road of history, but we must know more about the particular ghost before we allow him to appear in so serious a thing as a novel. I happened recently to pick up and reread The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is something of a curiosity of literature because its author afterwards became an ardent spiritualist, having written this full-length mystery novel from the standpoint of a complete materialist. And here, more than anywhere, appears this impression, the incompatibility of the two types of imagination. It is not merely that the two explanations of the ghostly hound cannot coexist as theories, they cannot coexist even as hypotheses. The materialistic detective cannot use a ghost even as a guess. It cannot rank as one of the theories which he abandons at the end. He is obliged to abandon it at the beginning. We must start with the assumption that a dog cannot really be a demon, and yet the whole story has to be haunted like any ghost story with a demon dog. There is evidence that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle took more trouble than usual with the atmosphere of this drama, even if it is rather the atmosphere of a melodrama. He took a wider canvas, he lavished much on scene painting, the landscape of Dartmoor. He went into details of topography and physical geography which would naturally have been too big a background for argumentative anecdotes of Baker Street. The whole panorama seems to be unrolled before us like a scroll of mystery and symbolism, solely to suggest a half-belief in the hellhound we have already been forbidden to believe in at all. The result is that the Hound of the Baskerville and the Hound of Baker Street are looking for each other in two different worlds. They cannot be said to be hunting each other, for they are racing on two different levels. I know not at what stage of Conan Doyle's conversion the book was concluded, but even if he had already become a spiritualist, I must congratulate him as an artist on leaving Sherlock Holmes a materialist. The same author, writing as a spiritualist, later gave a rather lurid description of the conversation of a materialistic doctor to spiritualism. But the difference is not between the different opinions either of the author or the character at different times of their lives. The difference is that not only was the character then a different sort of character, but the author was a different sort of author. The materialistic medical gentleman was a melodramatic character, and his conversion to ghosts was melodramatic. But Sherlock Holmes was a comedy character, and I cannot call up any picture of what a real interview between him and a real ghost would be like. Sherlock Holmes, having the kind of cleverness that belongs to a comedy character, has also the kind of stupidity, or at least the kind of limitation, that belongs to a man who could never have had a chat with a ghost. For instance, if I remember right, he begins his review of the possibilities with a well-known sceptical sneer, of the sort that is very familiar, and really very shallow, to the effect that it is a strange sort of spirit hound who leaves material traces such as footprints. If he were living for one instant in the tradition of the great ghost stories, he would be more likely to say that it would be a very unusual spirit hound who did not leave material traces or make some imprint in some way on the material world. Nobody would be particularly frightened of a completely immaterial hound, a metaphysical and mathematical abstract hound, a hound in intellectual solution. The power in every preternatural story, as in every supernatural belief, is in some suggestion of what is mystical, communicating with what is material. But there is no thrill either in blood and thunder or theology that has not that has not that touch of materialization. Even the tale about a skeleton is, in a manner, the Word made flesh, and the ghost is but a shadow of the resurrection of the body. So there we go. That's what G K Chesterton thinks about ghost stories. What about you? Let me know in the comments. Do take care, everyone. See you next time. Bye for now.